Greetings, everyone, and welcome to Back to Ashes. My name is Phoenix. I'd like to take a moment and acknowledge the elite members of the channel. Thank you for your continuous support. Without further ado, it is now time to go back to ashes, for once we arise from the ashes, we are a bigger, brighter, stronger, and a happier person every day. Sit back, relax, kick back, grab a snack or tuck in to get warm, and prepare for your dose of vocal melatonin entitled A True Mashup. Right after this intro, there will be an ad. I'll read the first story, there will be an ad, and after that, there will be no more ads within this video. Was talking with my stepmom about late night driving experiences, and she told me about an encounter she had in Leroy, Montana, on a road trip from Washington to North Dakota. She was on Route 87, and she was running low on gas. The Fort Benton exit had a lot of construction going on, and she couldn't see any way to get to the gas stations from the exit ramp. So she got back on the highway. After a while, she saw an exit sign for Leroy, Montana, and it said there was gas and food available. She took the exit and saw another sign reading, Leroy 5 miles. At this point, they had no service and were relying solely on an atlas. The road took them through a dark wooded forest, and after a while, my stepmom realized the odometer had gone up 15 miles and they still hadn't found any sign of a town. But she kept driving and waited for her friend, who was holding the atlas, to say something. After a few more minutes, her friend spoke up and said she thinks they passed Leroy somehow. My stepmom agreed. They found a fat shoulder to turn around, and as they were pulling off to make their turnaround, they both had an image flash in their heads. A man, standing in the middle of the road. Neither of them actually saw him in real life, but both could describe the man in exact detail. He was tall, with a brown flannel, and what looked to be a scythe broken in half, with the handle wrapped in a white bloody cloth. He also had a thick scar across his forearm. While that by itself is weird enough that my stepmom planned never to go anywhere near that place again. For the next 8 months, she received frequent calls from Leroy, Montana. After my own research, I've come to find out that Leroy is a ghost town unmarked on Google Maps, unless you specifically search it up. Me and some friends have already planned to go to Leroy over spring break this year, and see if we can't find anything. I'm posting this to see if anybody else might have seen or heard anything similar in the area, or any insight as to what might have happened. I'm sorry if my English is broken. It's not my native language, as I am French. 2 years ago, I met a guy on Tinder. Good feeling from the start. We quickly decided to see each other. He asked me to come and sleep at his place, which I accepted because we had mutual friends. I told myself that he was definitely someone I can trust. I arrive at his house at 9 p.m., and I immediately see that he is not as I imagined. He looked dirty. His apartment looked like a squat, and there was a smell of stale tobacco in every room. I see a stack of books on autism when I come into his house, and I ask him about it. I learned at this moment that he is autistic with Asperger's, and that he has difficulty differentiating right from wrong. He also tells me that he knows how to analyze nonverbal language very well, and that he knows what a person is thinking just by their attitude. I don't know anything about neurodivergence, but I directly wondered what his inability to recognize right from wrong meant. On Tinder, he told me that he wrote quite a bit, like me. So he shows me a poem he wrote on his computer. He recounted the rape of a child in quite precise detail. I freaked out. I pretended to appreciate his talent because he was really starting to scare me. We then talk about his ex, and he tells me that they had fun choking and drowning each other in the shower because they wanted to know what it felt like to have control over the other's life. It was too much. I had swept away a lot of red flags in just a few hours, but I just wanted to leave. Problem: I had to sleep at his house, so I had to find a plausible excuse to leave without him understanding that I was fleeing the situation. I was afraid that he had bad intentions and would come after me. If he understood that I was afraid and that I had understood his little game, I discreetly send a message to my father with the address so that he can come pick me up immediately. I explained to the boy that ultimately I couldn't stay, but that I was really disgusted at not being able to stay longer. I played the hypocrite to perfection. At this point, we were both in bed, and I was just looking at my phone, waiting for only one thing: to find out when my father was going to be there. At one point, he asks me if I'm in a hurry to leave, because he notices that I look at my phone regularly. I was scared, because I remember him saying he knew what a person was thinking just by his attitude. I told myself that he was going to take action if I didn't hide my fear. I managed to make him believe, at least I had the impression, that everything was fine and that I was in absolutely no hurry to leave. He offers me a massage, which I try to refuse, but not wanting him to understand my discomfort, especially since I was soon out of trouble, I accept. I find myself in my underwear, him on top. It was horrible. Just as he was about to touch my chest, my phone rang. My father was in front of his house. I get dressed quickly and barely say goodbye to him as I leave the apartment. I sent him one last message explaining that I didn't want to follow up because his behavior really freaked me out. Then I blocked him. One of my friends matched with him on Tinder a few days later. He had offered to come and sleep at his place. I warned my friend, who didn't follow up on this guy. I don't know if he was just weird or if something could have happened to me, but be careful on Tinder. You never really know what kind of person you're going to meet or what their intentions truly are. My earliest memory of a nightmare turned out to be a real event. So the title sounds like a no-sleep story, and that's the first thing I thought when I found this out about 2 months ago. I've been busy dealing with the wake of a family tragedy since then, but now that things are returning to the normal, I figure it's a good time to share my story. I'm sorry in advance for any formatting issues, but I'm using my phone and might miss a few words or it might sound scrambled. Buckle in, this is a long one. First, I'll describe the nightmare. It's a very short dream, and like I said, it's a very clear memory just because of how scary it was. I was about 4 or 5 years old, perhaps 6 at most. My twin brother and I had a bunk bed in a room at the furthest end of the house we grew up in. The nightmare had me in my bed looking out the window to see a red sky, the kind it gets in the early dawn hours before sunrise, but light still colors the sky. The next and only thing I remember is the nightmare, is that a man with crazy blue-colored eyes and a bald head appears at the window and stares right at me. The nightmare ends there, but I remember just how much I screamed and screamed about it. I don't know where my brother was at the time when I woke up screaming, And the only thing I can remember from when I woke up was having my mom come and get me and calm me down as she took me to her bedroom down the hall. I only remember that so well because I wondered where my dad was at the time. Fast forward to this May, and my father is in the hospital in the country he lives in, Colombia. And my twin brother and our older sister are staying in a hotel about a 5-minute walk away from the hospital. He stays in the ICU at. One night, after a long day of being there for Dad and for the extended family, my siblings and I return to the hotel and sit together to have a couple of beers and try to relax after all of that. We start discussing things, just trying to unwind, but somehow the discussion of nightmares and dreams come up, and I bring up the above story. Without missing a beat, my sister straight up explains that had really happened, that some guy really did look through my window, and that she remembers the whole thing. My sister, who was 5 years older than my brother and I, so this would make her 9 to 10 years old, had her bedroom adjacent to the bedroom my brother and I shared. Her room faced our front lawn and the street, while our room faced the neighbor's house and their driveway, with a very low fence between the two houses. While she didn't get into much detail about the days before the nightmare or event, she said that she had been followed by a bald man in a truck as she rode her bike home with some friends a couple of times before. The day immediately before this nightmare was no different, but the man this time actually drove right past the house. At the time, she was a latchkey kid, since my brother and I had to go to a special school about 45 minutes away from our hometown for a speech impediment that many twins have, and my mom had to pick us up rather than be home for my sister after school. But she was never home alone for more than an hour. That afternoon and evening was pretty normal, as she remembers it. My dad came home from his job. He worked as a part-time cop and worked in a local hardware store. And we all had dinner, did homework, played, and did usual family things before bed. That night, around 12 to 1 a.m., this bald-headed dude had parked down the street at a small industrial park and walked up to our house and tried to get in through my sister's window, which woke her up, and she screamed when she saw the man nearly opening the window as it wasn't locked. My dad stomped in and tried to shove the guy out, or try to hit him with a nightstick he had. My sister doesn't remember exactly, and this caused the guy to run off, but only for a short time, as he came back a moment later to try and get to the window in my room. He tried opening the window, but it was locked, because my mom didn't want my brother and I to open it, because our bed was right up against it. My sister said I screamed as loud as I could, and my mom went in to get my brother and I, while my dad tried to go after the man by running out the front door to chase him. But to no avail, as the guy hauled ass right through our backyard. The way our backyard was situated had it backed up against a small rail yard that is a part of the aforementioned small industrial park down the street from us. Between our small neighborhood and that rail yard was a good amount of very dense trees that always make the backyards very, very dark. So my dad didn't want to get attacked by him there, so instead, he went back inside our house, called the police, then our elderly neighbors to make sure that they were okay while our mom took care of us kids. That's all my sister could remember from that night herself, as this was a very long time ago. Neither of us could recall anything else after that either, and the story just sort of stops right there. My father sadly passed away in hospital, so we weren't able to ask him, and given all of that, none of us have thought to ask our mom yet, but maybe I will ask her soon. But for now, to the bald-headed creep who tried to do God knows what to my family. Let's not ever meet again. So the other night, on a mountain trail I've gone to for years to watch the sunset, I felt like some guy was tracking me back to my car. First time in my entire life of hiking alone, and I've done some sketchy shit alone at dusk, that I felt uneasy. So the mountain trail I go to is huge with many different side trails on it. But there is one main trail that goes straight up and down the center of the mountain, which is usually pretty quick to get up to watch the sunset. Done it hundreds of times at this point in my life for years now. I have watched the sunset, walked back to my car in pitch black many times. Never felt uneasy the way I did that night. I get to the peak, walk back down a little bit to my usual viewing spot of the sunset, and suddenly, some guy, also alone, comes out of one of those side trails. Thinking nothing of it, exchange a few words from a distance. The guy gets on his way, and I can see him even as a small dot as he gets down to the bottom of the trail. But I'm thinking, well, there's no way out of here, and he knows I'm still up here. So I knew I wasn't sticking around for it to get dark. The minute the sun goes down behind the mountain, I start my way back down. As you get closer to the bottom of the trail, there's a section that narrows and is nothing but trees and woods on each side before it opens up again to a huge open dirt trail, and then the parking lot. Heads on a swivel the entire way back down the mountain. I get to the creepy dark narrow part, just before the open trail to the parking lot, and I hear someone make a noise. Like a weird noise someone would just make to themselves, but loud enough as if they wanted me to hear it. But I see no one and keep going. I get about halfway on the open dirt road, almost to the parking lot, and I turn around and someone is decently far behind me out of nowhere. I don't look back again. I pick up the pace, get to my car, and book it. There was only one truck left in the parking lot by the time I got back, and it was on, and someone was definitely in the driver's seat. Call me paranoid, but again, I have never felt uneasy or like someone was following me like that ever in my entire life. And I have done about 80% of my hiking completely alone and a lot at night. Like deep woods type of stuff at sunset and dusk, and never been almost scared like that ever before. So this literally just happened to me Wednesday night. My boyfriend lives in the town over, and he orders me lifts back and forth to go see him. We've been doing this over the past 7 months without problems. We spent the day together and had an amazing time as always. And he ordered my lift back home. The guy pulls up and my boyfriend puts me in the car and gives me a passionate kiss goodbye. This driver is from Cuba, hardly speaks a lick of English, and is using Google Translate the entire time to talk to me. First, it started off as, "Do you mind sitting in the front seat? I don't like for people to sit behind me." Okay, no problem. However, instead of letting me out of the car, he asks me to climb over the seat, which made me feel a bit uncomfortable. And then I realized that he's staring at me the entire time I'm doing this. Then he proceeds to tell me, "I hope I'm not being too daring, but you are very beautiful." Okay, cool. I get this compliment all the time. So I say thank you, but I'm a bit put off by this. He goes on like a regular driver, asking me if the music was okay and the volume. You know, the regular stuff. Then he starts asking me about the address I'm going to. Am I taking you to your home? I reply, yes, I'm going home. He then asks, can I come with you? I laugh at this and say no. He asks about the guy that put me in the car, if he was my boyfriend or my husband. He's my boyfriend, my soon-to-be husband. He asks, can I be your boyfriend too? I say, absolutely not. He asks, why not? I say that I'm totally against that I'm in love with my boyfriend, and very much, and that I'm extremely loyal and faithful to him. He says, he doesn't have to know. In Cuba, we believe in having multiple partners, and not all of them know each other. And I say, well, that's definitely not a thing for me. I don't believe in that one bit. He says, your boyfriend made the mistake of sending you home alone. I would have taken you myself to make sure you got there safe. I'm getting very upset at this point, and I'm only laughing at what he says, trying to maintain a friendly composure because I know how ugly things can turn if I start giving this guy attitude. He doesn't speak again for a while, and when he does, he asks me again if he could come home with me. I tell him no again, and he says, you are just so beautiful. I really want to be your other boyfriend. I don't even say anything but shake my head, no, and start fidgeting with my phone. He tells me that he has a lot of money and that he could take care of me. I told him that I didn't care about that and that I wasn't interested. He asks if he could give me his number so that we could text each other, and I say no. After what seemed like an eternity, we pulled up to my house, and he gets out, trying to help me with my bags. I decline his help, and he tells me, hold on, and pulls out his phone one more time and asks, can I come with you? I tell him to have a good night and to have a safe trip back, and dart inside as fast as I could, locking all of the locks behind me, call my boyfriend immediately so that he could report this weirdo because I don't want this unpleasant experience to happen to anyone else. The only thing Lyft did was give my boyfriend a $5 credit to his account for the unpleasant experience. He wasn't even able to tell them why it was unpleasant. Shaking my damn head. So yes, ladies, creepy drivers are definitely a thing. Please be careful out there. My husband and I hiked the approach trail to Springer Mountain several years ago, planning to summit and return to the bottom and camp. It's summer, like 90 degrees, and besides a few trail runners early in the day, we really see no one else. It takes a few hours longer than we anticipated, and we are beat. Also, because of the way my leggings rubbed, I have the worst chafing imaginable and just do not want to hike down again. We set up to cook dinner, and a man comes from the opposite direction toward the summit. My husband strikes up a conversation, and the man agrees to give us a ride back to the park where we started from. We throw our packs into his truck, but I keep my cell phone in hand, even though it is nearly dead and I had no signal. The guy had said he knew the way to the park and could get us back quickly. But then suddenly he has taken a wrong turn, and now he has to turn around. Something about his story does not add up during the entire ride. He says his wife is in labor with their first child, but he had to get away for a bit, take a hike to clear his mind, etc. Okay, whatever. Maybe he is nervous. It happens. He just kind of rambles about weird things and then realizes, oh wait, I've taken another wrong turn. We turn onto a road and there's this old house and he wants us to get out and look at it. Won't take no for an answer. Then he gets really weird. He asks if he can take pictures of us in front of the house, standing on the porch, sitting. He is in full photo shoot mode. I want you to look happy. Now I want you to look angry, etc., etc. We get back in the car. I'm thoroughly creeped out. He is Sheldon Cooper in Ted Bundy form. He tells my husband that his car is running hot and needs some water to cool it down. He has some in the trunk, if my husband wouldn't mind getting it for him. I instinctively hop out with my husband because no way am I getting left in the car if this guy is trying to split us up. We put the water in and away we go. I am telling my husband in the car how we had to meet so-and-so tomorrow morning. We made plans, whatever I can, just so this man takes the hint that someone knows where we are and had plans to come see us the next day. Our location was known. Exact plans were not to anyone but us. We weren't meeting anyone. I am frantically relieved when I finally see that we are finally nearing where we parked our car in the park. When we finally find it, this man will not leave while we are putting our packs and things into the car, asking our plans, etc. He asks for my phone number, and I give it to him, off by one digit. I tell my husband to go into the hotel and go get us a room for the night so that we can rest. Our plan is to actually wait until he is gone, and we will get a campsite. The man says, well, they have a really great dinner. I will follow you inside and see about that. I lock myself in the car, and my husband delivers some spiel to the desk attendant about us needing to book a campsite. Something. Can we drive around and look for an empty one? He was feeling extremely skeptical about the situation too. His plan was to say we were booking a site, wait for this guy to leave, and return to the hotel later where the guy wouldn't know our room or anything. We drive to the farthest, lowest point of the campground and sit for nearly 2 hours. It's getting dark, and we are tired. We finally decide to drive through the camping area and to the hotel. Surely this guy has gone. As we drive past the tents, we see his car just sitting and waiting where he was in full view of the camping area, but can also see the hotel parking. My husband pulls a U-turn and we book it nearly 2 hours from the park and find the worst, cheapest hotel. To this day, we swear that we dodged a bullet. This man could have committed the nearly perfect crime if he had picked us up from the top of the mountain, and we just never returned to our car. The fact that he was waiting on us when we returned sealed it for us that this guy really had some major horrible plan for us in mind. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention. No, we did not call the police to report the incident. We had no cell service where we were, and our main priority was to get where we started, and then to put some distance between ourselves and this man. This is my single biggest regret in the whole matter, but it was just not in my mind at that time. By the time we had driven from the state park, it was late and we were exhausted. I no longer have the phone that I had then, but I do have several photos from this trip. I know that he was wandering around the summit as we were taking pictures at the top. And I also have a picture of the house because when he said that we had taken a wrong turn again, I was going to attempt to GPS us back to the park. It is highly impossible that there were pictures of his car and or him. Photos from this day, including the house we stopped at. I am going to try to get into my iCloud and see what others that I may have. I did not expect this to blow up as it did, but please be careful when you go camping and always say no to strangers that offer you a ride in the dark. When I graduated college, I was about 24 years old. I really wanted to get out of my town and try living alone. Luckily for me, my grandma had asked to be moved into an assisted living center about a year prior. I had asked my parents if I could live there. They talked it over with my grandma, and she agreed it would be nice to have someone there after a year of it sitting empty. This was in a kind of up and coming area, but still had its rough spots. I was so excited until I got there to do a walkthrough to see how I was going to set up my things. The house was a shotgun-style home with a cellar that could only be accessed from the outside. While I was walking through the house, I swore I heard noises. Finally realized they were coming from the basement. I called the police and they came out and escorted about 6 people from the cellar. They were squatters that had been living there. After they left, I went down there to find all kinds of stuff. The cops took all the drugs and anything else illegal. It looked like someone had spray painted all the walls. It was just a concrete cellar where the water heater and HVAC was. So I wouldn't have really cared, except it seemed to be kind of satanic. I didn't know anything about that stuff, but there was a couple of pentagrams and a chalk circle on the floor. Cops didn't really have anything to say about it. They didn't know either. I poured some water on the floor to wash away the circle, but the walls I just left as is. Fast forward a few months of me living there. I had forgotten all about it. Had started dating my future wife, and she was over. We were getting ready for bed, and in the bathroom brushing our teeth. A knock came from the back door. I ignored it, but it came again. It was 1 a.m., and this was my back door. Someone had to have come into my backyard by opening the fence gate. I grabbed my gun and went to the door, keeping it out of view. Some guy was standing on the porch. I opened the interior wooden door, but kept the outside storm door shut and locked. I asked what he was here for, since it was so late. All he said was, "Is Christina here?" I told him he had the wrong house, and all he said was, "Oh, so you don't want me to leave?" I told him he better leave and not come back. He just stood there staring at me. I was getting very nervous at this point and shut the door. He walked down the steps and just stood in my backyard, staring at the house. Then he tried to open the cellar doors. I had them padlocked, and he gave up. I opened the back window and told him to get the hell out of there before I called the cops, or he gets shot, or both. Again, he just stared, but then finally left. I didn't sleep that night. Again, a couple months later, my girlfriend told me that guy was back, just standing in my backyard, staring at the house. This time, it was in broad daylight. I called the cops this time. He tried the cellar doors again, but left before they showed up. The next day, I went down to the cellar to see if maybe there had been something left behind that he was trying to get, but found nothing. It was just a damp, disgusting cellar with a dirt floor. I have zero idea why he wanted in there. I highly doubt the satanic stuff had anything to do with it. It just made things creepier. I, unfortunately, had to move out sometime later as I could no longer afford it. and I never saw that guy ever again. I'm a 29-year-old woman. I lived in a big city all of my life. But at the beginning of April, I moved to a medium-sized town about 1 hour away from that big city, along with my sister and our 4 pets. This happened after a month of living here. My sister was preparing for her final presentation for her arts undergraduate, which was going to be shown in the city. So she had to spend the entire day there to make her preparations. I was left home alone with our cats and dogs. So, in the early evening, I decided to go for a long walk with my 2 dogs. We walked for like an hour, but about 5 away from our home, as we were heading back, I saw a man knocking on the door about a block away. I thought he looked a bit weird because he would knock on the door, look around, then knock on the door, and then look around again. But he didn't look dangerous, so I just kept walking, since I had to pass by him to take the street that would take me to my home. When I was about 10 meters away, he looked my way and started walking towards me. He was tall and slender and was carrying what looked like a box of candy. He asked me if I had any coins to spare. I told him, "Sorry, mate, I only have my dogs. Poopy bags. Have a good one." And I was ready to keep walking when he saw one of my tattoos and stopped me. For some context, I have tattoos. I'm not heavily tattooed, but I have several in my arms and legs. And since I was wearing shorts, the ones on my legs were visible. The specific one he was looking at is of a ghost woman in a traditional Japanese style. As he stopped me, he said, "That's a really cool tattoo. Would you give it to me?" I just laughed uncomfortably, thinking he was joking. But he was dead serious, just staring unblinking at my tattoo. He then continued talking. "No? So you're just gonna let the maggots eat it? Such a shame. It would be better if a person ate it." At this point, he raised his face and looked me straight in the eyes, with a very flat smile that seemed to be an attempt to be friendly, but only made me feel even more uncomfortable. He then asked me for my name, and not wanting to antagonize him, I gave him a fake one. Let's say it was Regina. He then asked me if I lived in town, to which I also lied and said that I was from the big city and just visiting. He then told me he used to live in that city too. He lived on the streets downtown. He told me he used to rap in buses to get money, and just out of the blue started rapping about me. Still looking me straight in the eye, he rapped about how I was very pretty, how amazing my tattoos are, and in his rap he said my name was Lorena. I corrected him and said my name was Regina and not Lorena. Since I had a suspicion, he realized I had given him a fake name and was testing me. He just smiled and nodded. He then asked me if I'd give him my number. I said that me and my dogs had to go home, that we were expected. He pointed at the butcher shop a block away and told me that we could sit over there while I gave him my number, that it wouldn't take long. But I told him that I couldn't, that the one waiting for me at home was my boyfriend. But I was lying again. Since I was home alone, his face faded a bit, and he just said, "Well, that sucks." I wished him a good evening and turned around to leave, only for him to drop to his knees and grab my leg with both of his hands. He started caressing my tattoo while whispering, "It really is a goddamn cool tattoo." My dogs are pretty friendly, and they were very calm during this whole exchange. But when he grabbed my leg, they started growling. I pulled my leg out of his hand, wished him a good evening again, and just walked away as fast as I could. I took a longer way home to make sure he didn't follow me. And once home, I took a shower and scrubbed my leg really well since I felt gross after all of that. Luckily for me, I haven't seen him again, but for a while after that, I made sure to cover my tattoos every time I went outside, just in case. Me and a friend that I will call Robert had just spent the day in a city a few hours from our own. We had just spent the day at an event in which we had both participated in, and we had a blast. After the event, we decided to go out and get dinner with a group of friends and ended up staying in the city until almost midnight before we decided we should probably get going. The drive home was very uneventful for most of the way home. The roads in between the two cities are very rural, with only a few small towns between the two. Since it was dark, we spent most of the time looking for animals that may run out on the road while chatting with each other. As we got fairly close to Robert's house, we saw a car parked on the opposite side of the road, facing the wrong way, and a man walking around, on and next to the road. The car in front of us just so happened to be an ambulance, which stopped to try to help the man. As we drove past, I made eye contact with him, and we continued on our way, thinking nothing of what just happened. We drove for another 20 to 30 minutes before turning onto the access road to get to Robert's house. As we got farther up the road, we noticed another car had turned onto the road farther behind us. Robert lives in a gated community, so we had to turn onto the driveway so we could go through the gate. This is when we noticed that the car that had turned before had turned again and was right behind us. As we pulled up to the gate, Robert opened it and we drove through. The car behind us had also managed to make it in before the gate closed. Neither of us had really thought we were being followed until this point, but even then, we joked about it. We then drove for a while inside of this neighborhood, which is fairly large, and noticed this car was still behind us. The route we took was a large curve, so we figured he should have turned off by now. As we got closer to his house, we decided to keep going as the road would loop around and confirm that we were being followed. At this point, we called my friend's dad, who had just watched us drive by with his car behind us. As we came around the loop, we had come to the realization we were actually being followed. Robert then started driving much quicker through the neighborhood, and the car behind us has also sped up. We were going about 50 to 60 miles per hour on these fairly small roads, but the other car kept up. We drove for a while before we decided to head to the front gate, which had a 24-hour security guard, and we still were not sure if the person following us had a key fob to open the gate or not. We left the neighborhood and pulled a U-turn back to our front gate. We were still driving very fast at this point, and to anyone, it should have been apparent we were being chased. As we came back to the front gate, my friend was able to open it in a way we couldn't be followed. But as we turned the corner, we saw the gate opening, and the car was following us, drove in. This is where we made a huge mistake. We turned down the road without realizing it was a cul-de-sac. As soon as we noticed our mistake, Robert was able to flip the car around so we could get out of there. But as we drove by the car, I made eye contact with the driver, but could barely see his face. When we turned out of the cul-de-sac, we turned off the lights and booked it. We finally had managed to shake him and get to Robert's house. We waited at Robert's house for the police to arrive, and shortly after the officer had arrived, he got a call on the radio and he booked it to his car. A few minutes later, 2 more police cars showed up, and we were informed that they found the car. The man was the same guy we had passed on the side of the road around an hour earlier. When police first made contact with him, he refused to speak and did not look like he was in a right state of mind. As the traffic stop proceeded, he began threatening officers. We later found out he was a mentally ill and unstable veteran from a couple states over and had no reason to be anywhere close to where we were. The man had broken the back gate as he followed us in. The worst of all is the guy at the front gate, whose only job was to not let people in if they didn't have a fob, without stopping at his booth and let this guy in after we had just sped past him. He was quickly fired by the security company. Looking back on this, there is only one thing I would have changed. I would have called the police sooner, but the adrenaline in the moment clouded our judgment. It was 2015, and I was doing an AmeriCorps term, doing meadow restoration. From May to early September, 10 days on the back country, 4 days off in Tahoe. We would return to the site for my last 3 projects. This all happened on my last couple days of projects. We were in a chain of meadows for a couple projects. Our crew was 4 people. We were on a chain of meadows: Dutch Meadow, Strawberry Meadow, and Horseshoe Meadow. Usually with these sorts of projects, the Forest Service partner hikes out with, stays the night, and then the next day shows the crew leader the work site. When we arrived, I remember being surprised that the Forest Service partner wasn't camping out with us the first night, and he felt very rushed. He wanted to get in there, show our crew leader the work site, and get out as fast as possible. At the time, I thought it was odd, but didn't think too much of it. Was happy because that meant more privacy for our crew. Things started out small. Nothing that I would think too much of. Our water filter broke immediately, and if you've ever had to drink boiled water from a tiny stream where cows shit, it does not take out the taste. When we would return the next project with a brand new water filter, it almost immediately broke again. Things would continue to get weird, but not in a way that I would think much of. First, tools being moved around the camp. These tools, especially rock bars, are super expensive, but not only that, they're extremely heavy. The lightest around 40 pounds, and sometimes we would have them moved around the camp. My crew leader was annoyed because he thought we were being irresponsible, as these were expensive tools that needed to be put in the same spot in camp. Didn't think much of that either. Then the weird noises at night started. You hear a lot of weird noises in the woods. Tree falling, coyotes crying, cows in the meadows, animals walking around. And when you spend that much time in the woods, you get used to it. Then, one night, the sounds began. All I can really describe it is as sort of a metallic banging sound. The night they began, I stuck my head out of my tent and shouted to my crew leader that a bear might be in the bear bins. We had those super large metal bear bins with these screws on top. And when I first started hearing the noises, that was the only thing I could think of what it could be. Crew leader ran down to our kitchen and saw nothing. The girl who was camped next to the kitchen said the bear bins were untouched, but she heard the noises too. Then, finally, one night, something happened. To this day, I still can't believe actually happened. I gaslight myself with this story because I couldn't believe my own eyes. We would all chat after dinner and go to sleep pretty early. When dusk would begin, we would all go back to our tents. We were close to each other, but tents still had a solid distance between for privacy. My crew leader's tent was near mine, and we would usually walk back to our tents together. We had walked this path many times, as we had been on this project for a while now. There was a huge downed tree in the path, so large you couldn't just step over. Had to sit on it to get over it. We were walking back, and it was just about dusk when it's almost dark, but not quite. Still not using a headlamp. He lets me go first over the tree. I step down and look up, and what I see horrified me so much I got goosebumps everywhere, even my face. A woman. She's covered in a white-looking sheet. She's crouched on the ground, like someone praying in a church, and the sheet is covering her entire body. I only could see her side profile. I immediately freeze. Only time I've ever been truly paralyzed with fear. My crew leader doesn't realize until he gets over the log and looks at where I'm looking. And all of a sudden, he is frozen too. In the time this has elapsed, it's now fully dark outside. I don't know how much time elapsed. It felt like each second was an hour. But after a couple of seconds, I asked him, "What do you see right now?" And he describes seeing the woman. And while he is talking, he turns his headlight on, and we see her clearly. This terrified us even more, as we thought our eyes were just playing tricks on us because of the dusk. I don't know how much time passed at that point, maybe 30 seconds, and I say, "Turn it off, I'm scared." He turns off the headlamp and back on pretty quickly, and the woman was gone. I asked to sleep in his tent that night because I was so terrified. We didn't talk about it at all, just went to bed and tried to act like it didn't happen, and we just imagined it. Thankfully, that was the last project there, or I wouldn't have gone back. When we were packing to go, I had my feet out of the tent, packing up, and something growled at me on the left side of my tent, where I couldn't see. I screamed and my crew leader came running. Ranchers, a lot of the time, come get their cattle, and they have a bunch of cattle dogs with them. So I thought it might have been one of the dogs. My crew leader runs up and asks what happened. I ask if he saw a dog next to my tent. He said he saw nothing. I tried to erase all the scariness from my mind, as I had had a wonderful summer in the Sierras with wonderful people and a great time. When I got back to civilization, I opened up my diary to look up some things. When you spend extended amount of times without a cell phone, there are so many things you think of and talk about in conversation that you can't look up, so you write it down. I was looking at my list of things to look up and had become intrigued with the Native Americans that lived in the meadows we were at because we had seen some petroglyphs. I was doing my master's in American Studies at the time, and that was super up my alley. So I started doing a little research. As I started to read, I got scared all over again and read about how people in the exact meadows that I had been gallivanting around are the place where many other people have also seen this woman and metal banging sounds. Forest Service refusing to camp there or visit there. Turns out the campsite we were at was a haunted Lewis Stringer site that everyone there talked about. I sat there horrified as I was reading it because at this point, I had convinced myself that it didn't happen and I was seeing things. I would love to go back one day and see the meadow and spillway structures my crew built there, but I am overall too scared. I don't recommend that anyone stay or camp in this area. And that, dear listeners, brings a close to these mashup of true stories. Before I go any further, I would like to thank the members and the new listeners of Back to Ashes. Thank you all so much for your continued support. As I always say, without you, I wouldn't have a voice, and Back to Ashes would not exist. I deeply appreciate your continuous support. If you are sleeping, I hope Slumberland is treating you comfortably. If you are awake, I hope you've enjoyed these selections. In the meantime, please take care of yourselves. I'll be reading to you soon. Have yourself a good morning, a good afternoon, or a good evening. Peace, love, and light to you all.